Hello and welcome to the Growing Healthy Families podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Scott Haggerty. On this show, I interview the world's top health experts so that you can know with certainty what it takes to give your family a life of epic health and wellness.
As parents, we don't want to see our kids struggle. I knew that he had the potential, and I knew that something needed to be done.
It was hard. We would get frustrated. We didn't know how to deal with it. I was more emotional about it.
Sure that, we're here. Amen to that, brother. Amen to that. Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Scott Haggerty, and we are here with the Growing Healthy Families podcast. I am so excited for you to get a chance to be a part of this with us today. We have a treat for you. So moms and dads, we all have kids that are in sports. And many of us just want our kids to be the best performers, but we don't really have context as what is the best and safest way for us to help our kids become better athletes, but also protect them against injury. So today, I am privileged to be here with Ryan Fowle and Luke Chronister here at Elite Training Performance in Denton, Ohio. And so today, we're going to talk about a number of different topics that are critical for you as a mom and dad, a parent of a young athlete, so that you know what to do to protect your kids. So, gentlemen, first, thank you so much for being here. It's a pleasure. I'd like you to just tell a little bit about your mission here at Elite and what you do here with youth athletes so that the moms and dads can get some context.
So at Elite here, we're focused on long-term athletic development. So that's taking an athlete from whatever age they come to us and helping them grow and develop over time. So that way, when they're in their last season, be it senior high school, senior college, or 15th year in the pros, that they can be performing the best at that time.
That's a great answer. That's a great answer. So, moms and dads, what he said there was gold, because many times we hear about young athletes peaking too early because they were pushed and developed, so they weren't able to peak at the times that were most essential for their sport. What he said there was a huge thing, because he said about getting them ready to peak at the right times. Is that correct?
Yes. So along those lines of, an 8-year-old, we don't want peaking when they're 10.
Mm-hmm.
And then you don't know what a 10-year-old's potential is going to be when they're 15 or 18 or 24. So there's a lot of research out now on kids in their developmental periods, and the kids that are the tallest in middle school usually have the highest dropout rate in high school because they were 5'9" in 8th grade, and that's awesome in 8th grade. But then there's kids that are 6'4" in high school, and so while they're great youth sports athletes, they're not always the best high school sports athletes. So understanding that from the developmental side and pushing them when they need to be pushed, and then kind of building those skills throughout their middle school, high school career to hopefully have college careers is our goal. So
Awesome. So first, I'd like everyone to know a little bit about your backgrounds. So why don't you tell us about where you went to school, how you ended up in strength and conditioning, and about what you guys here have created at Elite.
So I went to Baldwin Wallace University, and I ran cross country and track there for all 4 years. And kind of what drove me to this field was I struggled with injury at Baldwin Wallace. My shins were just giving me all kinds of trouble. So I wanted to find a way to help athletes stay healthy and do things before they got hurt, so they didn't have to rehab or try to run through pain, which is not fun.
I also went to Baldwin Wallace University, it was college then. But I played football there 5 years, and I was a captain my senior year. But also along the same lines, I was a 3-sport athlete in high school, and then as I got into college, just focused on football, and there was a lot that went into that with injuries and playing varsity and JV. And I met somebody that taught me, like, hey, you can figure out how your body works, and you can make it more efficient, and you can make it work better. And I was like, wait a minute, really? I was like, whoa, I want to know how my body works. Like, I'm spending all this time training, like, why don't I know this already? So I had an extra science major, and then that led me to getting my CSCS, my Certified Strength Conditioning Specialist. So, and then we opened Elite, and I've been trying to help keep athletes on the field ever since.
So that's great. And so I actually happened to meet Luke a number of years ago, even before Elite was Elite. And one of the reasons why I was so impressed by what he was doing here with the athletes he was training, and then when he built and opened Elite, is because of the fact that his mindset was always about protect first and then develop. And there's a mindset that goes into helping kids to perform that always has to be set in the right place. So I know a lot of parents, are being pushed to get their kids into training early. So I think it's important we start giving frameworks for when kids should start into sport-specific training and what that should look like.
All right, so First, it depends a lot on the individual kid because the first thing that has to happen is you need to have kind of a good general base before you can really get into the sports-specific training. And then there's also maturity aspect. So some kids can handle really intense focused work at 8. Some kids can't handle that until 12. So if they can't handle the sport-specific work, you need to work on building a solid base through generalized training to teach them general movement patterns to make them more efficient and so they can move safer to decrease the chance of an injury later on. And then once they're old enough and mature enough and have a good enough base, then you can go more to the more sport-specific route.
So you said generalized movement. Can you give some examples of what that looks like?
So just proper movement mechanics. So we teach basic acceleration or max velocity movement and then how to safely absorb and reapply force, putting the body in good positioning and having good body angles. So that way down the line, they don't develop a habit and then down the line when they get bigger and stronger, that habit causes them to get hurt.
I think that like, we talk about sport-specific training, and with early specialization, I know that's coming up and we'll talk more later, but we talk about sport-specific training. A lot of people think about like, my kid plays baseball, so like, are you gonna be hitting balls? You're gonna be like doing fielding work? No, we're not your sports coach. We're building their energy systems, we're building their muscular connections, their tendons connections, we're building some bone mineral density. We're getting them functionally prepared to handle when they go to practice, to handle when they go to games. So they need to be able to get, proper shin angle, they need to be able to get flexibility in their hips and ankles and thoracic spine. Sport-specific training is only gonna say like, okay, if you're playing baseball, we need to work on your subscapular area, we need to work on your thoracic mobility. It tells me what areas of your body you're gonna be using more, so that we have to address them. If you're playing hockey, you're not throwing overhand, like what are the amount of shoulder work we need to do for a 10-year-old hockey player? We need to get some stability, some strength in there, but we don't need the same range of motion as a pitcher. So when we talk about sports specific, it's that detailed and it's that specific when we get into what we're doing with our athletes, as opposed to just, hey, come in, oh, we're all doing acceleration today, let's go. We got volleyball, soccer, hockey, lacrosse. So we say sport specific, each of our groups is broken down by sport, and then usually by age group, and then by gender. So we only have here one mixed group that's speed and agility because everybody needs better mechanics. So that's what we do in our speed and agility group, but that's because those kids really need the technique and they need emphasis on the technique, as opposed to their strength stuff is totally different from what they need, or their mobility, or just the specifics of their sport. So when we talk about sport-specific training, parents need to wrap their head around like, okay, what does that even mean? Let alone like, oh yeah, look, they caught a tennis ball today and they were standing on one leg. Okay, they're working on balance coordination and proprioception and then neural connections. Like that's it. It can apply to a lot of sports that use hand-eye coordination. So they're being does. So think of it that way, parents, as you're thinking about like what you're doing and like what you're hearing from people when they say sports specific. Okay, what's specific about it? What are you doing for my athlete at their age, at their gender, to make this specific to them?
I really like what you said there, because one of the things that I think that moms and dads, if you're not familiar with these concepts, let's just take a look. Let's say most of us have watched, say for example, like an NFL running back, like an Ezekiel Elliott, right? So when you look at a guy like that, the first and foremost thing that he learned how to do was to move well, right? He trained his nervous system, so he was able to establish these proper movement patterns to prepare his body for the more advanced concepts later on down the road when they apply the higher level of training and performance. But he was learning how to plan, how to move, how to protect himself, how to be able to go and accelerate and decelerate, because if you don't have those basic skills and you go out there and you try to go and do things full speed, what's going to happen? Injuries, right? And moms and dads, what he said was really critical, what Ryan is talking about is really critical to understand, is that there's so much more that goes into sport-specific training than going out there and just working hard, right? The balance and coordination components, the proprioceptive input. Training the brain is really the core of good training, isn't it?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, and I know so much of what you do is really about teaching kids these fundamental movement patterns, but can you elaborate a little bit more on the role of the central nervous system in training? Because I think it's critical that people get this.
Yeah, so as we're training and learning new motor patterns, we're kind of creating new neural pathways and grooving neural pathways better, and it helps to increase the myelin sheath to make the pathway move more efficiently and faster, so you can signal from your brain to your muscle to fire quicker.
You know, and that's something that's a good illustration, because one of my favorite things when we're in the practice and talking to kids who are youth athletes, I tell them to refer to the videos of Steph Curry or Kyrie Irving when they're doing the two-hand dribble, right? What they've done is they've trained their nervous system to fire so fast that they're using their proprioceptive input to not have to go and watch the ball. They can stand like this at lightning speed. And that's nervous system development that was trained over time to fire faster and faster and faster and faster and faster. But they didn't train that as a specific skill. It was training the nervous system to react faster. So I think that was a great concept.
Yeah, I like thinking of it as like, the old telephone wires, right?
Mhm.
Like, the more you train a pathway, the better the signal gets, the stronger it gets, the more insulation it has around it.
Yep.
So when you go, hey, we need to jump, your body goes, oh, we're going right here, and it goes right to it, and you can fire, instead of going like, oh, is it over here, and then over here, and then, Plinko,
Mhm.
all over the place, figuring out how to get the chip from the top to the bottom.
Yep.
And so we want one straight line, how fast we get this to make that happen.
Yep.
And so with our programming and coordination and our developmental skills that we have here at Elite, it really builds on that nervous system and controlling, because when you're young, you're very neuroplastic, right?
Mhm.
You know this
Great
stuff.
word.
You can get so many different things, and everything's a stimulus, and everything is something you can take in or react to. And then as you get older, like those get less, and there's less stimulus and there's less response. And so as you get older, you don't have as many. And so now you're only going to use the ones that are the most effective, because your body says, we're not wasting energy sending stuff all over the place. We want to use just the ones that we want.
Mhm.
So as you get older, those get less. And so if you can get the most effective, most efficient, best ones to work at a younger age, when you're 20 or 18 or in your prime, your body's already got the simplest things out.
Yeah.
So then you can really work on those fine motor skills. That's why elite level athletes, and like if you watch Hard Knocks with Jarvis Landry doing the single leg post to med ball slam,
Mhm.
like you don't do that at 10 just because it's cool because Jarvis Landry did it. He's doing that because he needs to challenge his nervous system past where he's at already to get adaptations to happen. And so that's why they're doing things like that. Not because they're an NFL player, but because that's what they have to do to get changes to occur.
That's a great concept, and that whole concept of neuroplasticity is really critical whenever you talk about any type of skill acquisition. And we use this term a lot of times because we work with kids with a number of different types of challenges, whether it's a kid who's got an ADHD issue or a kid who just wants to perform better, right? Nerves that wire together, fire together, and that concept is critical to understand that to help a child to function better neurologically, whether it's sports or school, it's about training the brain to be able to do what it's supposed to do. And so when you talk about kids, when you talk about performance, you need to think about the role of the nervous system being trained repetitively with increasing levels of stimulus so that it has to constantly stay in a state of adaptation, right? Because, what you're referring to is that guys like Jarvis Landry, right? His nervous system is really well developed, right? And he's able to, move quickly, but now what he's training to is to be more durable over time, right? Reduce his likelihood of an injury and still continue to work on reaction time. Because it's those little things when you get into more elite level athletics that really separate the men from the boys in a lot of ways, doesn't it? Right? So that's something just to kind of keep in mind when you start really looking at these concepts, because motor planning is huge, right? And can you tell moms and dads more about what motor planning really entails?
So for motor planning, we start just learning a basic skill, and then through that skill we keep progressing. So say if we're doing a bounding, we'll do a double leg bounding, just one, and then you'll add a second bounding. And then once they have that down, we'll go to a single leg bound, and then multiple single leg bounds. And then once you teach many motor skills, you start adding in just kind of a free-flowing drill or game, so that way they learn to kind of, okay, I know how to do this here, but if I do this and then do that right after it, I can get away from that kid so he can't tag me. So through teaching skills through a progression and then allowing them to move freely and let their brain make a choice, they can start to develop all those neural pathways and have them talk to each other better, so that way when they get to a game situation, they don't have to think, their body just knows what to do.
That was gold, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's why we usually move from structured play, unstructured play,
Yeah.
even if you're 20. Structured play to unstructured play, right?
Mhm.
We've got a drill where we have cones, and we're working on, okay, what's our rate of firing, and what's our movement, and what's our landing and absorption. But then we go into, okay, taking the cones away, and only make 2 hard cuts. and it needs to be under 3 seconds, go. And let them react to that without a stimulus, or give them a random stimulus with a visual, auditory, some different kind of stimulus that they have to respond to, and then see what they react like. And it's crazy to see how a planned movement doesn't always translate to a free movement. Like your body just reacts to whatever it is. You're like, all right, you see your dog's knee collapse there, you see your shin angle, you see your ankle mobility, how you had to externally rotate your foot to absorb force because your ankle can't bend. When we put it in plan and slow it down, you can do that. We put you on the field, and this is where injuries happen, because if you don't do the free play time, they don't have a chance to link that planned activity to the unplanned. And they don't set that pattern to where, if you just say, all right, we're gonna throw 4 cones down, all right, touch 4 cones, go. That's fun as a 10-year-old. But if you didn't prime that up to say, okay, we get to the cone, I want you to sink your hips, use your inside edge, have a slightly negative shin angle, and move back, keep your chest up, then you're not gonna be programming that into their free play.
Yep.
So giving them the knowledge and understanding, okay, how does my body move and why? And what do I need to focus on when we're doing this? And then we prep that, your educational background, for them to like throw it in there and says, okay, the drills we worked on, I want you to try to apply those skills in this free play. I want you to have fun, I want you to work hard, and I want you to enjoy, but I want you to think about one thing. And so, depending on their age, you want to give them that, you know, that, okay, if you're 8, we're thinking one thing today, okay, I want you to sink from your hips today. All right, we're going to build up. All right, I want you to sink from your hips, but I want you to keep your chest up. So you're going to progress that as kids get older, they can handle more stimulus or more direction. So,
Yep. And for those of you who are not familiar with some of the terminology, what the real gems that Luke and Ryan are talking about is that planning, the sequencing and the building out and layering helps kids to learn movement quality and movement efficiency, because all of these things have to become more and more and more of a reflex as they get out into the field for them to be able to perform at a higher level, because as the game speeds up, their nervous system needs to speed up, doesn't it? Right? Because what happens if their nervous system can't match the demand of the speed of the game?
they lose.
Yeah, they do, right? And of course, you know, the other side of it too, and sometimes worst case scenarios, that kids get hurt, right? Because the nervous system has to be able to prep for the expected and the unexpected, right? And I know when you were talking before about, you know, so much of the work is about trying to go and increasing like mineral density and tendon strength and ligament strength. A lot of that is geared towards helping to make their body more resilient for sport in general, regardless of specialization. So let's dig a little bit deeper into things like neurological fatigue, because, you know, one of the things I think that a lot of moms and as I've talked to in the past, when their kids are in conditioning settings, right, certain conditioning settings, if they don't see their child working hard, right, and if they're not sweating and they're not being pushed really, really hard, they think, well, what did they do, right? And we have the conversation oftentimes about the importance of training the nervous system, but let's talk about the danger on the other side of neurological fatigue and performance. Can you guys elaborate on that for me?
Yeah, so like you were saying, especially with younger athletes, sweatier isn't always better. Because we can just turn the heat up to 90 and the kid's going to sweat a lot, but they're not going to get any better.
Just like how you do it.
Yeah.
So sometimes if we're teaching a specific movement mechanic, we might have to slow everything way down and go step by step by step, so the kid can start to think, feel where their body is, make those connections, but they're not going to be sweating because they're not moving a lot. So once they start to make those connections, they can start to progress, they'll actually move enough to be sweaty. But if they're fatigued neurologically, their whole body is going to start to slow down because their brain, so we do before all our sessions is just a simple tap test to test how fast their nervous system's firing that day. So we know they had 3 games over the weekend and their tap test is lower than it normally is, they're neurally fatigued, so we have to do more recovery things. But if it's not, they're just kind of tired, they probably were up late, Snapchatting or Netflix or whatever, so it's like, all right, you're fine.
Yeah.
Go to sleep early tomorrow, and you'll be fine. So from there, if they're actually neurological fatigue, we're going to see a marked decrease in their performance, physically and mentally, so they won't be able to process things. So you'll be explaining a drill, and they'll act like you're speaking a different language, because their brain just won't understand all the details.
And you also have a couple different things that happen with neural fatigue. So you'll have a decrease probably of school performance, their concentration, their focus, their ability to complete simple tasks, organization. So those things start to happen. You can also have somebody that, they're going to report being tired, so give them a questionnaire on their tiredness level, like, oh, yeah, I'm like 9 out of 10 I'm tired, but their body doesn't feel tired, they're not going to have any lifting differences, but they're mentally fatigued. And so when you're learning new skills, you're working the nervous system, you're working that processing skill. So you might not be tiring your muscles out, but you're tiring your brain out. And it's hard to like equate that to a number and say like, all right, they're 20% fatigued. Well, on our TAP test stuff, we can get an idea of what that is, so their standard deviation and where they're out from that, and kind of what their normal is for different situations. But that's kind of the big thing with nervous system. But you also have things where you get like, nervous system shunting. Like, so if you are doing a new drill and it's just like a shuffle change, or you have like a shuffle change to stop, and they've never done it before, their body literally will shut down their arms. They're like T-Rex, moving their legs, they're stuck in a cone, and you're like, are you going to use your arms today? But you can tell that you have overloaded their nervous system because of that. Because now they're focused so hard on getting their feet where they're supposed to be, organized, planned, that their body says, I can't even control my arms right now, they need to just stay still. I can't do arms and legs, and my hemispheres are all like all over the place. So that's why they have, like, you'll notice that when you're coaching, and you see it happen, like, okay, this is too much stimulus for this athlete, so I need to either reduce my cues, simplify the drill, or change what we're doing, because you can get feedback from your athlete that way to say, hey, the nervous system said, this is too much.
Yep. Well, and let's take it one step deeper, because if you have a child, youth athlete, who's working in the fatigue zone, and you try to apply these new patterns, are they learning the right patterns, or potentially learning the wrong patterns? And it's things like that, that if you always push a child, or push them when you don't recognize the level of fatigue they're at, they're going to write in bad patterns. And when we say bad patterns, right, it's the brain is always adapting and learning to every stimulus we put in. And it can be a positive, right, when we learn optimal movement mechanics, or it can be a negative when we are layering on more and more dysfunction in the way that we move. And so moms and dads, well, that's a really critical thing. And I very much appreciate the fact that they do the nervous system assessment, because if a child comes in and they're in a state of neural fatigue, you're not going to make progress with them if you don't have a recognition of what that level of fatigue is. You can actually make them significantly worse in their performance and their resiliency and their ability to adapt to the stuff that their coaches are trying to teach them, when their nervous system is at a state where it's already depleted and they're not recovering and they're not processing the movement mechanics correctly, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's a really, really critical thing to keep in mind. And if you have a child that's already in sports performance, these are things you should be asking yourself. And the reason we did this honestly today is because so many of the people that we work with have kids that are already in advanced training. And we have this conversation a lot about, is your child being assessed? How hard are they pushing? Is your child recovering? Is this being mentioned by your coaches? And unfortunately, that's not necessarily the standard across any industry, is recognition of that role of neurological fatigue. Would you agree with me?
Yeah, or fatigue in general. I mean,
Yeah.
It's we're in a society that wants more, faster, stronger, better, and we don't really talk about, hey, we need a recovery day. What does that even mean? Or like, hey, the season's over. Like, let's get back to training right now. And I'm always like, take 1 or 2 weeks, go be a kid, do your thing. Like, you want to play basketball with your friends, play basketball with your friends. If you want to go fishing, go fishing. Like, do that for 2 weeks, a week, go do your thing. Like, enjoy, and then come back, refresh nervous system, refresh muscles, and we'll go from there. But if you don't allow that time to happen, you can't stay at the peak forever. And so, training is a wave, and we're always riding a new one, right? We're like, okay, we got to, when's the next big game? Let's get to that peak, let's get to that peak, let's get to that peak. All right, we can play through this game, we can work through this game, and then that's, can we stretch this wave a little bit? Oh, you're going to go, sectionals are straight, we're going to stretch that last wave a little bit, because they keep winning. Or, we need to shrink this is, the valley of this hill. And so that's kind of where, like, your planning and preposition really takes over for all of your sessions for your athletes. So if you're not looking at it that way, I think you're really missing the boat, because you can't just take a kid and be like, hey, everybody's doing the same stuff, or like, hey, we're working at this level all the time, every time. And if you've dealt with athletes long enough, you know that they can't do that, because there's too many outside factors in middle school and high school. If you're the only person that works with them and there's no other stimulus, absolutely, you can plan all of that every day. But in the world that we live in now, it's not how it works. So.
Yep. Well, and I think one of the topics that you threw in there beautifully is periodization, right? And so I'd like you guys to talk about the importance of periodization, because many people don't realize what periodization is, the importance of it when it comes to youth athletic development. Could you guys spend some time talking about that?
Yeah, so periodization, to put it not simply, but to kind of bring it down a little bit, is varying your program so that way when the athlete's trying to peak at the end of their season, you can get them there. So like Luke was saying, if you work like high weight, high reps, and just push weight from week 1 of the season through the beginning of playoffs, that kid's going to be really fatigued. They're not really going to have many adaptations, and then they're just going to be exhausted going in because their body's destroyed. So you have to figure out, okay, this is the end of the year, this is when we need to be at our best. And then through the season, figure out, okay, this team maybe is not as big of a challenge, so we can go a little heavier that week. But this is an important game, so we have to be ready that week and kind of ride the waves and generally increase the size of the wave so that when you're peaking at the end of the year, the wave's as tall as it can be for that year. And then in the off season, you also need to periodize, because same thing, if you just hammer for 10 weeks straight, you're gonna have no adaptations, the athlete's probably gonna be neurally fatigued, have an increased risk for injuries, so that way when they're in practice or something, their body doesn't respond, and then they're gonna get injured in practice doing their sport practice, because you fatigued them for 10 weeks.
So when you guys put together a program, let's just say, for example, it's a single sport athlete. What does a year of periodization look like? How do you phase that?
But usually, we start with like a functional movement assessment, screening of some type, baseline measures, whether strength or speed or agility. And then we have 2 separate programs going on, right? We have our movement program, and we have our strength program. We'll call it strength because sometimes it's power, sometimes it's muscle size and mass hypertrophy, sometimes it's strength. And so we have 2 different programs going on. We have your metabolic system, and then we have your muscular system, which is more your strength and power output. So there are 2 programs that can intertwine along with your flexibility, your nutrition, your speed, all those things get mixed in there. So we usually start off with that assessment, say, okay, where are you at today? What's your competition schedule? What's your practice schedule? What are your stressors? I think of periodization as stressors. So, every time that an athlete is in a session, we're going to either increase their stress or decrease their stress. So I'm going to add stimulus to them to make it harder or faster or stronger, or decrease to say we need to recover so that we can then perform in our next opportunity. So I think of like managing stress is our job as a strength coach, and you're either adding that or taking it away. And when we late a year, the more like soccer has 2 seasons. They peak for fall in high school, and they peak for spring in club. So we have girls that just played nationals last week, or 2 weeks ago. There were nationals in the middle of January. They go to Florida playing some. And then, then they'll be off for another 4 weeks, and then they're going to have nationally play for 2 months, and then they'll have June, July off. And then August is preseason for high school, and then high school season will go through November. December, we're going to get like a rebuilding, recovery, get back into general strength. If they go to nationals, we'll repeat again for nationals in January, and then that cycle happens. So with each athlete, we're like, okay, you have practice twice a week, 3 times a week, 5 times a week. Are you doing extra foot skills work? What are your conditioning levels at now? What are your conditioning tests? What are your strength tests? So we have to take in all this information, and then we have to sort it out into these categories: conditioning, strength, recovery, sleep cycle, practice, and manage all those different stressors and say, okay, your stress is up here. If I add to that right now, your injury potential is pretty high. If your stressors are here and you're performing okay, and we add to that, all right, you're going to get a lot of benefit from that. So if your stressors are here, I probably need to find things to take away from your stress and ways to kind of de-stress that system so that we can then build good quality on top of it. So every sport has a different system, like a different periodization, and every athlete has a different age. If you play 3 sports, we've got to transition you out of a sport, into a sport, out of a sport, into a sport. Never happened for me in high school. I went from football, right to running for wrestling, right to wrestling practice, right from wrestling, right to baseball. And I got to summer like, hey, we gotta lift every morning. And I'm like 2 months of just straight lifting. I'm like, wait, I haven't lifted in like 2 months. And I'm like, I can't gain any weight in high school. I don't know why. There was no periodization between somebody that does 3 sports. Or nobody saying like, hey, you need to transition out of this sport and transition into this sport. Like, hey, your advanced football are a little different than wrestling. Your advanced wrestling are a little different than baseball. I always loved going to baseball season because I was in like the best shape ever after wrestling. And I was like, coach, like run 10 poles. And I'm like, oh, how many? We're on 20. I guess it's easy. So, like, nobody ever looked out for that though, or managing an athlete that's doing multiple sports. And my biggest thing is trying to take care of those athletes because kids play multiple sports is gold developmentally. So, I just think like taking care of all those parts, and the more things they do, the more intricate their program becomes, the more time and planning that happens. Not so much that you see here, you know, because we're doing an hour session or an hour and a half session, and, you know, a couple times a week, and okay, yeah, I'll spend it for my hour. You know, I spent 6 hours preparing all of this for you to do, and then gave you, here's your conditioning for 3 days a week, and then we have different things we have to manage from your coach's practice schedule or conditioning that got added in for any reason or taken out. So we need to manage those things, and it's always kind of in flow. But those are all things that we have to control throughout one athlete.
You know, I love how you guys describe this, and I think one of the things I want to circle back around to that you took out of that is that you talked about, you know, being a multi-sport athlete in school, because I mean we see a lot of kids that are starting to specialize at relatively young ages these days, right? So realistically, if moms and dads are wondering, should my child specialize? If they're going to, when should they start looking at that? What does that look like? And what is the importance of being in multiple sports instead of specializing at a younger age?
So if you're going to specialize, generally you want to wait until kind of the end of your high school career when you're getting ready for a college career. Because that's when you really have to focus in and get even more of the super detailed work.
I'm going to cut you off right there, just because on that point, the reason for that is, the athletes that are the best at their sport, they're in balance, right? They're good at something because they can do it better than other people, which means they've created a system that works better than everybody else's. So most pitchers have imbalances in season, right? And that's why, because they're really good at what they do, but they can't have that the whole year,
Right.
Because then they get injured and they break. So with that being said, that's why individualization too early causes those problems.
Yeah.
So our goal is to manage that for kids that are like, hey, I love baseball. All I want to do is play baseball. Okay, well then we need to be your other sports. Like our company, we need to manage your off season, we need to manage your in season, we need to manage all those things with our periodization. Because we have to provide the things you're not getting from wrestling or basketball or hockey or tennis. So we have to manage those things for you, whether it's our development, our planning, our programming, and creating those things to create balance in some degree.
So what are some of the risks you see with because so many kids are specializing in single sports younger ages, what are some of the risks that mom and dads need to know about as far as things they need to have as red flags for their kids specializing too early?
So it's like he was just saying, with the baseball pitcher is a great example because it's a very one-sided movement. Or the same with soccer players. Like if you're right-footed, your left glute's going to be stronger, the left side of your core is going to be stronger from kicking. So that creates an imbalance because you kick a ball 100,000 times in your life probably. Yeah, like,
100,000 million times.
So if that's all you ever do from when you're 8 until you're 18, you're going to kick the ball a lot of times. So that side's going to be really strong, and your right side's going to be really weak. And you can balance that through other sports by getting exposed to different movement patterns, by getting exposed to just different strength requirements. Because movement for soccer and basketball might be different, or seem similar, but like if you're an outside back for soccer, you do a lot of long runs up the side of the field. But in basketball, it's more, you have to be really tight, be able to move laterally really quickly. So by getting exposed to different sports and different movement patterns, you create more of a complete athlete.
I think it's a really important concept because moms and dads, when you look at athletics, right, one of the bigger overarching concepts I think that we're hearing here is that there's a lot of risk to becoming too specialized, too imbalanced at a young age. And so let's say, for example, you know, with a lot of kids who are becoming specialized early, what are some of the things we tend to see later on down the road when they're approaching high school and college? What does their performance tend to look like as they're hitting those points?
Like in our experience, we've had athletes that might come, you know, if I get a kid when they're 10 or 12, like those magic years, right, you know, at the end of 5th, 6th grade, they're just like, they start like, I really love sports, and I'm going to do this, and they're mentally prepared for it. That's usually about the time fifth, sixth grade before they go to middle school, and then, they have a competitive schedule, and it's a lot different. But then we can build that up, and we can kind of control all of those things. If I get a kid that's a junior in high school, who's been playing hockey since he was 8, and we've had kids that are just, I shoot right-handed all the time, and so they're walking around like this. Why? Because they're shooting right-handed slap shots all day, and nobody's ever thought like, hey, we probably need to, get some muscular balance there. Well, that's really great, and I bet a slap shot's amazing. He's not going to be able to maintain that forever. So, before he has an injury. So, they usually either have injuries quickly, or they have a slower progression when they start, because we've got to retrain, and they're like, we're not like doing anything that's helping hit the puck harder. I'm like, well, if we get things balanced, your body works as a system, and so when it's better balanced, you're going to create more power. So when you get that back to a happier state, you're getting less likely to be injured, create more, force slings and more rubber band effects on the muscles, because you can stretch harder to then contract harder. And then you have to have that conversation about, understanding how your body works. And then, okay, you can do that. You might play well for a month, you might play well for a year. But you're gonna be injured.
Yep.
And that's gonna happen. And so whether you want to pay insurance or you want to get yourself fixed, like, what do you want to do? So.
I think it's important, especially when you start talking about those imbalances, because imbalances are a huge issue. Moms and dads, your child's brain, your brain is really, really, it's intelligent, right? It has an innate intelligence of how it's supposed to turn your muscles on and off. But the more imbalanced that you become, the more you use one group of muscle or set of muscles, the more it's going to become overly adapted to that stimulus. But then the other side of it is it turns off other muscles that you normally need to protect your body. And so when you start getting to a place where you've done the same movements over and over again, and there's never been a concern for balance or an emphasis on balance, then it leads to these structural issues like you talked about with unlevel shoulders. Well, that unlevel shoulders also has a lot of other consequences because it affects neurotransmission. The ability of the brain to be able to keep balance, consistent feedback up to the central nervous system about what's happening in the periphery is decreased when there's not normal movement mechanics to keep those pathways open, right? And I'm a chiropractor, so that's kind of a thing, right? So those things are really central to why when I, as a chiropractor, look at helping kids that are youth athletes, it's important that we recognize the importance of these structural, neurological, physical balance points, because the more imbalanced that a child becomes, the more imbalanced any of us become, the more dysfunctional we become in the things we need to do on a daily basis, whether it's sport or anything.
I would say probably more agitated overall.
Yeah.
Your body's not working optimally,
Right.
so it's going to become more frustrated, whether it's mental frustration or physical frustration. Why are you upset all the time? I don't know. Like those things lead to impairments in your body, your mood, and your ability to perform.
Yep.
Right? You see with kids all the time, like when a kid's injured, what happens? They're not really happy about it. Not only because they can't play, their body has got a huge stressor it's dealing with.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, and adaptability to that stress is a really critical component to stress in sports and life. So, one of the things I think that's a good caveat at this point is talking about transitioning into, when should kids start looking at adding load, right? Some people call it weights, but let's just talk about when do we start looking at applying load to a child's body? Because I think it's important that we lay this out there for moms and dads who aren't familiar with this.
So with strength training with young athletes, usually between ages 7 and 9, you can start to do movements. But don't forget that your body's weight innately. That's why you're not just float around, you have weight. So at that age, you can start to teach them about squatting and lunging and do glute activation, because that's something that's chronically weak is glutes. Core stability, push-ups, pull-ups, just body weight things. And you can do 100 different variations of those and modify it as you need to for the athlete so they can do it successfully and learn about how to move their body. And then once they can do that and their core is strong enough and they're starting to physically develop a little bit more, you can start to add actual weights. Because it's difficult to say the definitive age range, because some kids, when they're 10, they look like they're 15. Some kids, when they're 15, they look like they're 10. So physically, you might not be ready to actually use big weights. So the worst thing you can do with the kids is, all right, you look like you're pretty strong here. Let's load this bar up and get after it. So you have to teach their body how to move and how to transfer load from one state to another before you can start loading it up with an external load.
we usually talk about kids with their, you know, their genetic age versus their lifting age. Everybody comes in at 0 for the lifting age. I don't care where you've been, because, you know, if I haven't taught you how to do it, I assume you know nothing. So, because there's a lot of bad patterning that's happened, you know, if you're not coached specifically one-on-one, face-up, then you probably have some adaptations and some changes that have occurred and made things worse for you. So, I'm not saying that it's all bad, but there are things that you can't see lifting by yourself, or if nobody's giving you feedback, there's no feedback loop, so it's just happening. So we really want to work on that lifting age. I've been lifting for 5 years. All right, go ahead, I want you to do these 5 basic movements. All right, I'll do it with weight. No, your lifting age is 2. So, you know, it's really good to put them into that, because then when we get those limits of, you know, your lifting age, it allows us to do different things. You know, if your lifting age is not 3, you really should be doing really high level plyometrics, especially weighted squat jumps or like weighted jumping, because you have a built up the tenderness or like the cartilaginous resiliency or thickness to do those things. So yeah, you can do it maybe a couple times, but if you do it repetitively in a program, you're going to create injury. And so figuring out kind of what that your training age is versus your genetic age is a big difference. So there's kids that come in at 10 and they've already, you know, had a year of training and they're pretty good. There's kids that come in at 18 and they've been training, they're pretty bad. So it's all relative, because it just kind of depends on the athlete. And so wherever we're talking about that training age, I usually look at that. What quality instruction have you had? What's your movement pattern look like? That's going to determine your load. Now we also have to do with your genetic potential, you know, like your growth plates and, you know, those high marks for boys and girls, like girls 13 to 15. After 15, you can increase load with girls, which is a lot younger than boys. So if you want to push weights with boys when they're 10 years old, they're not going to be done right until almost 20. 18, 20, I think it's girls almost 22, like inches at a time. So it's just different. So not understanding that those genetic markers and developmental markers and kind of those places where the kids are going to be like growing. It's important to understand your load and how much impact and how much volume you're putting into your program. So not saying you can't work kids really hard and they might get sweaty, they might have a lot of neural adaptations, but you have to be sensitive to those growth periods. And it's all going to be laid out based off that.
And I think a lot of this is really important to kind of string together, because moms and dads, you know, what I've been able to witness with kids that go into training and they get it done the right way, they learn to be able to go and move functionally first. And they train their nervous system so that when the load is applied, like they were talking about, is it's done in a way where they've got the movement skills, the movement mechanics, to be able to handle the more complex movements when load is applied. But it's essential to have these foundational pieces, because if you don't have a good movement foundation, and then you apply load, all of a sudden everything is going to crumble and your child's going to get hurt. And so, you know, like what you guys are talking about is that it's important that we have this progression so they're built up to be able to go and handle load. Because if there's a compensation they've created, right, where if they can't keep their hips in the right position, if they can't keep their posture upright, and then you put them under a squat bar, what's going to happen? They're going to fold.
Yeah, and the better part about that is, so you've had that, you didn't get that baseline training, right? You've been putting your high school program and you're lifting with your team and things going well, and you start lifting at, you know, 17 or 16 or 15. But you come in at 18, like, hey, I'm a college scholarship, I need to really train hard. Well, now we're conflicted as a strength coach, right? I need you to get stronger and faster, I need you to like develop all these things, but your foundation isn't good. Your pyramid is upside down. You should have this big base, and you should have the next block, the next block. And we should be working on these top couple blocks going into college. But you showed up here at 18 and you don't have the fundamental skills to hop and land, bound, and absorb force. So I'm conflicted as a strength coach what to give you. Do I give you strength and power and make those things that are already bad worse? Potentially setting up for more injury? Or do I have to like say, like, hey, we're going to sacrifice some speed and some power because we got to build your foundation so that you don't get hurt and you can play through your senior year and not just make it to sophomore year. So that, I mean, when you start a training program late, you have a bad foundation. It's very hard as a strength coach to say, okay, what am I going to give? What am I going to take here? Because I can't do it all, and I can't, unless the athlete's like, I'm just going to spend 10 hours a day training, like working on my mobility, my flexibility, my body movement. And some of them will. But there's a huge conflict when it gets to that point, to where, yes, you need these things to be better at your sport, but you need these things to not be good at your sport.
Well, and let's actually circle back around to that, because what you said there is sacrificing the load to train the movement mechanics. What typically is going to happen when somebody makes a decision that I'm going to focus on developing these foundations to their long-term progress?
Yeah, they have, they're initially going to have a decrease in their strength and their power and their speed, because we've got to retrain the nervous system. We've got to retrain the firing patterns. We've got to increase mobility in things, which changes all the structure. It's the same reason why a 10-year-old boy that grew 2 inches in a month looks like a baby giraffe when he's running right now, because his nervous system can't coordinate. The muscle fibers contract as fast as they need to put the limbs where they need to go. So it's just doing the best they can, which is exactly how it should develop. But they look awkward and uncomfortable. But if we have that same thing happen in a less awkward kind of state with an older kid, it's not fun for them, because they feel like they're getting weaker, they're getting slower. But if we get that foundation set, then we stack back on it, they can, like, their levels go a lot higher. But we have to have that kind of that unloading, that reprogramming to happen. And I mean, it's not like a 2-day thing. It's a month process. Like, you've had 18 years of poor training or improper training or improper movement that has led to this place. Like that can't get unwound in a couple minutes.
Yep.
So it's all relative.
And that term, the concept of regression before the progression is super important, because, if the brain has to be retrained, it's going to take time. But the upside becomes so much higher, so much higher. And I've watched with so many kids that we've worked with and co-managed together with, that when you take the time to retrain them to move and then fire, create the right movement patterns and firing patterns, the upside is tremendous. We've seen many, many examples of that in kids that we work with together. And so I think it's important you keep that in mind, that there is going to be a give and take when you get into, very specific types of strength and conditioning, that you have to understand that your kid might be the most amazing athlete, but if they've built a lot of dysfunction in the way they move and you care about the long term, then there has to be an investment in short-term sacrifice so they can have long-term protection, but also having those significant jumps in long-term performance, because eventually what's going to happen is those performance dips, right, are going to sort of multiply if they move dysfunctionally. If the nervous system can't handle the progression, the movement and the load and the demand, and all that stuff becomes more and more evident as they get to higher levels of performance, right? And so then they get hurt. And moms and dads, none of us want our kids to get hurt. We want our kids to be awesome, do amazing, but there has to be these foundations that are laid down so that they're built up appropriately over a lifespan, developed, so that they can handle the increases in performance, both physically, structurally, neurologically, right? One of the things that I'd love that you guys talk about is the importance of prehab. And this whole concept of prehab, I think, is so important. Can you spend a moment talking about this, guys?
Yeah, so that's basically, prehab is doing corrective type exercises to strengthen specific areas of weakness based off of the athlete's sport, to where we can hopefully help prevent injuries before they happen. So if we know, we were talking about pitchers before, they do a lot of internal rotation. So they'll do a lot of shoulder external rotation exercises to get your subscapular region stronger. So hopefully they don't end up with rotator cuff issues.
That's excellent.
But there's also, we're talking about muscle fiber type, contractile speed, that they get more advanced. But yeah, so, we know these are all deceleration muscles, these are all acceleration muscles when pitching. So then, okay, that muscle firing in the right plane, right? You can sit here and do the reversibles all you want, but if that's not how the muscles work when you're using it, it's not going to be trained to connect the right way. So not only do you have to look at that, you have to look at, what is the mechanism, what is the contractile type of that muscle fiber that we're trying to use. So we talk about preventative stuff. Sometimes it's as much as just creating more flexibility, or if your hamstring's really flexible, why are we stretching hamstrings today? You don't have a hamstring inflexibility problem. So A, that's not a waste of time on it. B, that's not make a muscle that's already gone longer. So
Well, what's the reason for that?
Well, because if a muscle's long, it won't contract. If the muscle's too short, then you have knots and adhesions, and then you're gonna have an alternate pathway that starts creating. So that's overuse.
Yeah.
That's what we're getting into that. But, so when we get into overuse stuff, the muscle overly tight. We want that happy optimal state, so you just go and fire right now, right when we want them to too long, it's like, oh, we got it, contraction. Too tight, they're like, I'm already stuck, I'm not doing anything. We gotta find a new place to contract. So that's what I tell kids, like when we work on, tissue quality intersections, or we're doing some prep stuff, like we try to layer that in, not only with our strength stuff, or our movement stuff, but there's days when we're like, hey, today we're gonna get 30 minutes, we're gonna be working on tissue quality, mobility, in the areas that we need it. Not just doing everything, but areas that we need it. Maybe you had 5 tournament games this weekend, a good recovery strategy. We can get that tissue back to being pliable, happy, contracted, so not overly stretched areas that were unused the whole weekend. So we're gonna turn those ones on, we'll turn these ones off, lengthen these, tighten these, and create that balance again. So.
I think that's an important thing you just alluded to is the importance of rest and recovery in performance. Can you guys spend some time talking about the importance that moms and dads make sure their kids have proper rest, proper recovery?
Yeah, so when you train an athlete and work really hard all the time, you need to rest because that's when your body makes the adaptations you're trying to get. So if you train 7 days a week, 2-3 times a day, your body's gonna get run down and break down because training is generally just damaging the muscle fibers so they can make specific adaptations to the demands that were put on them. So you need to let your muscle fibers recover. So a lot of that is taking maybe just a day. It's not a crime to take a day off and do maybe some rolling, some stretching, do some like contrast showers or something just to help cycle blood and fluid and stimulate the lymphatic system.
For people who aren't familiar with what a contrast shower is, can you explain what that is?
So it's in just at the end of your shower, you have your hot shower water for about 2 minutes and then turn the hot off and make it all cold for about 30 seconds. So what that does is the hot cause vascular dilation, so it increases the blood flow to your muscles. And then when you turn the cold on, it creates vascular contraction, so it limits the amount of blood to the muscles. So that starts to flush new oxygenated blood in and take the other blood out. And stimulate the lymphatic system to bring all that damaged stuff out of your muscles so they can start to heal.
Pretty interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, so a lot of times it's just, that exchange of fluid. You do the same thing by putting your feet up on the wall during your workout, or push all the blood from your legs back towards your heart. And then when you stand up, new blood will come. So we try to find creative ways, and that's why, being a CSCS is great because we have resources, and other professionals that we can, discuss with and keep our continuing education stuff up. But I don't make those things up. I'm not a genius. It's from discussing with other professionals and finding out like, hey, what are you guys doing to help with recovery? What are you guys doing to help with tissue quality? What are you guys doing for ankle mobility? Or trying to find those things out from other great people. So that's kind of part of it is getting all those things in line for recovery. It's hard because it doesn't seem like you're doing anything, and it's awfully very boring. And you're like, oh, I'm just gonna sit here and roll on this roller for a while. Or, I love contract showers. So I just, my wife's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, go and shower. So it's a pleasure for her to help me.
But things like that are really important to realize because oftentimes if we don't maintain our body's going to break down. And we can only push so hard before our body's going to start to push back. And talking about things like the showers and talking about things like foam rolling and mobility exercises, and all of those things are critical. I mean, it's kind of like a car. Like you're not going to run the car into the ground without doing maintenance. Your body's far more complex than your car is, and so it's important that we address maintenance. Things like tissue quality, right? I mean, how many times do you see athletes who come in and they've got just tons of adhesion that's built up because they've never addressed it? And for those of you who aren't familiar with what adhesion is, right? It's not
All the time.
Yeah, all the time, right? Adhesion can be non-traumatic scar tissue. This stuff can form just because of overuse and imbalances. And if you allow this stuff to accumulate, it changes the way the muscles are able to contract, fire, get blood in. They can hurt just because they're adhered. And so if you don't address those things, it can really inhibit performance, lead to increased risk for injuries, and a ton of other issues. Wouldn't you guys agree?
Yeah. That is probably like our biggest thing is like a new client. First thing we do, here's how to use your foam roller. Here's how you get some supple tissue. Oh, that really hurts. Yes, because you've overused that muscle. That muscle's angry with you because it's not at a happy state. So again, that education for youth athletes, them understanding like, why are we doing this? It's just being me. You know, like, I'm trying to get you to understand about your body, and when you feel that tender spot, it's saying, you've really used this too much, and it's really sore, and because it's been overused at this point. So what area do you think you need to spend some time working on, athlete? The ones that are tender and sore, you know? And then like, okay, so which ones that, you know, as a coach, which ones do you think probably shouldn't be working as much today? Those ones that are sore. So, or maybe, you know, if we're really going for big adaptations, like, we got one more day. They're gonna be all right, one more day. So, you know, depending on what our plan is, but,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that you always go, oh, I'm sorry, you're a little sore today, we gotta pull back. So,
Yeah.
you know, there are days when we push, and there are days when we have to recover, so it's all on the plan. But, I know we talk about recovery a lot, and tissue quality, and take that stuff, because I feel like, you know, most kids, they're gonna go in and work really hard. Most athletes are gonna work really hard, in 99% of the cases. They wanna get better, they're there because they wanna do better to sport. They're not there just because, like, I have to go. So, and the thing that we have to do is educate them on how their body's working, the things they need to do on top of that, because, yeah, most kids are happy with weights. They're like, no, oh, med ball throw's great. Oh, strength, oh, okay, cool. All right, like, they enjoy doing those things. That's why they're athletes. You know, they're usually probably kinesthetic learners, and they like being active, and it's a good outlet for them in a lot of different ways. But when you don't educate them on how to prepare those things, that's where I think the problem leads in. Or when you're doing the same thing all the time, that's the part that I find. I'm always pushing, like, can you roll this week? Like, how many hours you roll this week? They're like, one. I'm like, well, you were here for, that was 20 minutes of that was here. Athlete, like, so you rolled 2 other times this week of 7 days? Like, what do you think your tissues are like? You worked out 17 hours this week. Like, you know, like, put that together. It's not equal, so.
Yep. It's so important. It's so important. I know that we could dig into so many little micro topics because of all the things that we've gone through here today. But you know, I think it's important that, you know, the moms and dads who listen to the podcast, that you get an idea there's a bigger picture plan. And you know, when you have people that are experts like Ryan and Luke, you realize there's something very different about the way that they view helping to train kids, right? From the education to the movement training, to the lifting, to the performance, and all of the little pieces that go into managing and helping an athlete to develop properly. So I think it's important that if this is something that you're struggling with for your own child, you have concerns about what can I do to protect my child, how can I help to improve their performance, if you're in our area, so I want you guys to make sure you reach out to these gentlemen because they're the best of the best of the best. So, and how can you reach you guys?
You can email us at eppscheduling@gmail.com. You can visit our website. There's you can sign up for our newsletter on our website. It's elitetrainingperformance.com. So those are 2 good ways that you can get to our phone and everything from there. So, but those are the easiest ways, just through our website, or you can just email directly to our scheduling system. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here today. It's a pleasure. Thank you very much, Ryan. This was great.
Yeah,
Thank you, Luke. This was great.
Thanks,
And,
Scott.
can I hold you guys down to do this again?
Sure.
Yeah. All right, excellent. All right, so moms and dads, so if you've seen this and you got some value out of this, do me a favor, I want comments. Make sure that you send your questions through, because if you send questions here to us, we're gonna make sure that we're gonna pass it on to them and get you guys some answers. And then, of course, that's another episode. All right, guys, thank you very much. God bless and be elite.
Thank you for listening to the Growing Healthy Families podcast, the world's #1 source for health education. Make sure to go to iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts and give us a review. Make sure to follow us on social media at the links listed in the show notes, and let us know what area of health you are struggling with so we can get you and your family on the road to epic health.